Welcome to the new episode of Still Irish, Ireland's podcast of record. My name is Killian Foley Walsh, and whatever they're paying you, I'll double it. I'm delighted to be joined this week by John Bryan, community activist from Downturn in County Kildare and recent President of Ógra Aontú. It's good to see you, John. How are you going?
Thanks very much for having me, Killian.
Not at all, our pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on. Obviously, there's plenty to talk to you about. It's been a busy month. I wonder, do you even need an introduction from the likes of me at this stage?
Well, no, it's very much appreciative. It'd probably be more accurate or truthful introduction, perhaps. I feel like a lot of people have gotten to know me for a rather niche story at this point, so I do appreciate the introduction.
Not at all. Well, look at the niche story, I suppose. Let's crack straight into that. You've been in trouble in the last month.
Yeah, so we got in a little bit of trouble, Killian. We had a private group chat, and we were saying some pretty immature things into it, making a few jokes that maybe we shouldn't have. But that is the nature of young lads at the same time. It's just we were caught out for it. And look, we offered our apologies. I offered my own apologies, and I just want to move on with things now. I want to get back into doing what I was doing best,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the key thing. And being brutally honest, you probably wouldn't have been on this episode if it wasn't for apologising,
Yeah,
But
so
I
maybe
think
it was all worth it. You never
well,
know.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, the apologies I don't think can be understated. It's important that you did it several times and publicly. Now, that's more than can be said, as far as I can see, for whoever took it upon themselves to take the veil off of this thing and go to the media and everything else. They apologize, but I mean, obviously we all have an inkling of who's who, but nobody actually knows who this person is. It was all anonymous, whereas you were put front and center in media and everything else, local, national, podcasting, and apologized quite publicly, which is important and mature.
Matter most, for sure.
Exactly.
And I can tell you one thing: the motivation with that individual that did do this, it wasn't a good one. It wasn't trying to make the best of the situation. It wasn't trying to point out what was wrong. It wasn't trying to change anyone's hearts or minds or correct anything. It was a pure character assassination, So that's what happened. That's my view on it, at the very least,
Absolutely. I think it's probably shared by a lot of people as well, John, to be honest. But I suppose the other end of apologies is that when most people apologize, they generally expect somebody to offer them a hand or something and help them back up or whatever, accept the apology basically. And I can't help but wonder if any of the people who were quite loud and vocal about all this, and there were a number of them, as I'm sure you saw, have any of them said, you know what, he's apologized, let's all move on? Or have you just been...
Well, I haven't even been paying attention, to be honest, with what a lot of these individuals were saying. I mean, for many of them, like I said, I apologize to who matters most, and I'm not going to sit around and apologize to people who will only ever be happy with me when I'm found at the end of a rope. So I'm not going to waste my time trying to apologize to them. Lots of these people, when you see some of the attacks that did come out, some of them were just ridiculous. And those individuals didn't want me to come out and change and be better. They just wanted me to simply die. They wanted to bury me in a grave and let that be the end of me. But as you can see from the very nature of me being here, that's the last thing I'm going to let happen.
The reason that I asked you that question, Don, I suppose, is because I half anticipated the answer would be no, that nobody had reached out to, help you up or anything like that, or accept your apology or anything, because they don't, big difference maybe between controversies I was involved in, you were involved in, maybe not in terms of readership, but definitely in terms of content maybe, but... simple fact of the matter is that, there are people who come out for blood from the likes of you and I, as you mentioned. They would have been happy, unfortunately, to see you at the end of the rope. It's not an overstatement, that this stuff does have an impact on mental health, and a lot of the people who come along going on about this stuff every other day of the year, as soon as an opportunity arises to really hammer somebody, boy, did they go to town, and so... It was just something I was curious about in your own experience. Had anybody matured in the 6 years since my own trouble or whatever? And the answer is no, by the sounds of things. But equally then, I suppose I'm curious, has anybody, I presume you've gotten support through all this, people have reached out and clapped you not clapped you on the back, but, said, keep your chin up, that this doesn't define you or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, from the outside looking in, I can imagine that most people would see me and see someone who's just utterly surrounded by hate, especially through the past month. To be honest, I've never felt more love in all my life. You know, I took a break from social media when it all happened, very briefly for a week or two. The amount of people that came to my door in my own home area of Derrinturn and were just knocking on the door asking if I was okay, bringing my mother groceries. You know, like, I mean, even simple stuff like that.
Absolutely.
You
Gestures are gestures.
The amount of text messages, and even I got one text message. I worked in Pader Tobin's constituency office in Trim, and I helped a lot of constituents there over the year I was in the job. And one woman who I helped, she was an immigrant, and she texted me and she said, yeah, I know everybody's calling you a racist right now, but if it wasn't for you, my 2 children wouldn't have a roof over their head. And so ultimately, when we get caught for our bad deeds, it's the only thing that can save us is our good deeds at the end of the day, you know.
It sounds like you've got quite a bank of them, which is to your credit, you know. And I suppose it kind of brings me to the next thing that's on my mind in relation to all this, which is just how badly Aontú have fucked up in all this, you know, from 2 elements. So, I mean, in the first element, very often they try and make a brand for themselves of being anti-woke, a word that I hate. I think it's hackneyed now at this stage, to be honest. There's a particular generation of people using that term. I don't know what I'd use instead, but anyway, I'm using it for the purpose of this conversation. They present themselves as being anti-woke, anti-cancel culture, you know, plain people of Ireland, common sense, yada, yada, yada. And then at the first opportunity, and as far as I know, this is the first opportunity for Aontú. This is the first, like, this style of controversy there has been for the party that's been around for the last 6 or 7 years. The first opportunity.
It was an honour.
It was an honour, exactly. It should be a plaque.
Guinness Book of Records, mate.
That's it. But the first opportunity they get, it's not even enough to just get rid of you or fire you or whatever. It's enough. They have to go on then, you know, absolutely lambasting you in the media, almost going around looking for, in the same way as Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, looking for head pats from people who would never touch them with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Yeah, and even I think there was a bit of an overextension. Like, look, I'm not going to sit around here and say I don't understand why I was kicked out. Poor me. I'm not going to do that. But I do think there was a little bit of an overextension, and like what I was told originally, not to get into any kind of confidential details or anything, but that a statement would be put out, or a statement might not be put out, but whatever it would be kind of fair and not overly biting the bullet. The morning it all came out, that Sunday morning, I was in the car, I was turning the engine, and next thing, KFM comes on, and a very familiar voice is saying, disgusting, abhorrent young man. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I just hear, that's John Bryan from Derrinturn, and I was like, oh, fuck. Now people are going to know I'm from Derrinturn, you know. So it was a bit mad. There was just I think there was a heavy delivery in terms of what actually happened. I think the statements that were put out were a bit strong. I think normal people in Middle Ireland don't necessarily want to hang a young fella for a few racist jokes in a group chat. But I think the reaction was one of a reaction to something that would be a witch hunt, which certainly wasn't the case, you know.
Yeah. But it's very often the case, I found as well with these sorts of things, that it's almost like people then jump in to try and save their own skin, because if they're not seen to be aggressively anti-target, in this case you, but aggressively anti-target enough, that all of a sudden, oh well, you must sympathise, you know, you must agree with them, don't you?
Yeah,
it is, sure. Exactly. It's absolute mob rule. And it's funny that you mentioned the plain people of Ireland to a degree in that as well, because like that's what occurred to me with my previous question about, you know, did anybody reach out to give you a leg up or anything like that? It's like I think 90% of people out there, again, you know, wouldn't repeat what you said and wouldn't be happy to hear it or anything like that, but equally have a forgiving nature and have no desire to see somebody, as you said, to hang somebody for, you know.
I'll tell you one person that did actually, someone who had no reason whatsoever to reach out to me, but he still did, was actually John McGurk. You know, we were making a few jokes about him and about Gript or whatever in the group, but he completely put that aside, you know, aside from what people were saying on Twitter about it. And he reached out to me and he called me. And I'll tell you one thing, it was one of the nicest phone calls I've ever had. And he was an absolute gentleman about it. So he was someone who reached out, who didn't have to at all, you know.
Yeah, well, you know who your friends are in moments like this, you know, they really reveal themselves. But it brings me to the second problem, I suppose, that arises for Aontú and all this, which is that they have thrown away an up-and-comer, you know, formerly their up-and-comer, but still an up-and-comer. Like you said that you had, you know, people from your area coming to you, offering support, buying your mother groceries, all this sort of thing. You have, I think, a future in politics. I think you hope you have a future in politics as well. And Aontú has ultimately potentially thrown away at least a councillor that they could attach to their roster. You know, what do you make of that? Bit stupid, right?
Yeah, look, it's a little bit stupid, but I mean, ultimately, if the party feels that what I did was so bad that I was utterly untouchable to them, then I don't want to be a part of that, you know? I don't want to be part of an organisation that's so unforgiving like that. I mean, I gave 2 years of my life to that party. Like 2 years of full-time work of my entire life. You know, I lost plenty of friends by being in that party. I did all sorts of things. I mean, like, when I first joined Aontú, I was just turned 19 years old. I'm 21 now. I travelled all around the country in the local elections, was an election agent in local elections. I became the youth wing leader. I was in Mayo. I helped Paul Lawless get elected. I lived there with him for over a month.
Oh God, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was, to be honest, it was probably the roughest month of my life. I mean, like, my godfather actually died while I was over there, and I missed half the funeral. I had to get back up before polling day, as gruesome as that sounds, but I mean, it was worth it.
You were committed.
I was committed. Paul's a great guy, like, you know, and I was so happy to see him get elected. And then after that, you know, getting the job with Padder and working in the trim office, like, I devoted my entire life to it. You know, so it's a bit weird for it all just to end like that, you know, over a couple of stupid jokes. Like, the whole trajectory of what my life could have looked like staying with Aontú and, you know, being an Aontú rep or a candidate. But I'm more than happy and more than willing to keep doing what I'm doing as an independent. It's not like I was being particularly supported in what I was doing locally by the main party. So I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing, you know, which is helping people in the local area. I mean, even just this morning before I came here, I was in the pub, you know, helping people in the snug as it's done. So I'm
rhymes.
Great, yeah. Well, look, great
Almost.
business for the turn in. A little shout out there. But
The turn in
Darren
turn, is it?
The turn in Darren turn. It's
Right.
what the locals call it, the wrong turn.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
or you turn in and you fall out. It's a rather poetic name, but there you go. Like, I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing, and I'll be running for election in 2029.
Excellent.
And that's the plan.
That's good to hear. And I mean, even when you talk about the trajectory that your life was on has changed and everything else, like, there's every possibility, I think, that this could be an uptick in that trajectory, you know, out of all this. Maybe not the way that you wanted to experience the uptick, but it could be there all the same, you know.
Yeah, well,
we'll see.
we'll see. Yeah, I mean, for sure, it was. I've matured, anyways. I mean, it's a hell of a thing to go through, like, just to wake up one morning and you're everywhere. You're the most hated man in the country. Like, it's kind of
those
mental.
were the days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it wasn't even for myself, more so just the people close to me in my life, you know, my personal family relationship, etc. Those are the people you really feel for, and that was the worst of it, to be honest. Thinking you've hurt people, you've embarrassed people, and humiliated them. That's the worst of it. But you know, the people. So funny, actually, it was a priest that said this to me. A really nice priest in the Newbridge parish, who I'm good friends with, reached out to me, and he said, out of all of this, you'll know, like, the people who don't forgive you aren't worth having in your life, ultimately. And there's an element of truth to that, you know. I mean,
Big
as a
element of
society,
truth.
we've lost kind of all sense of forgiveness in the past couple of years. Maybe we have to bring that back, you know.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And even when you're talking about family and stuff, again, I remember back in my own situation, there are certain people in life who you have a right to expect a degree of, you know, loyalty, I suppose, from. As long as you're being sincere, which you were, in apologizing and everything else. If you're being a melt, then, you know, not so much. But when you're doing your best effectively under the circumstances, you have a right to expect a degree of loyalty, in my opinion. And I'm glad to hear that it sounds like you have been able to enjoy that, you know. And those are people who you should be loyal to in return, and I'm sure you are. You know?
Lots of Ógra Aontú members, I have to say, they were amazing when it all happened. You know, they
Really?
Oh yeah, they were contacting me. Some of them were very angry now. Why wasn't I in the group chat? You know, and there you go.
Yeah, well, because that brings me a little bit then to the next question I suppose I had, which was on the media coverage. I remember reading and how over the fucking top it was. I remember reading one article recently where a high-ranking Aontú official said that this is all totally against the ethos of Aontú, and there's an attempt to subvert effectively the party and everything else. And it sounds to me, just on the basis of what you've just been saying, that actually what's against the ethos of Aontú, if the members are anything to go by, is treating you in the way that you were treated. You know,
yeah, there was a lot of upset members for sure.
Yeah, and there might be some cause for reflection there for the people who, you know.
Yeah, there was a couple of resignations from the party Ard Corla and everything.
There were a couple of what?
Resignations from the party.
Really?
Yeah.
And they didn't get in the news. Why was that?
Well, it's in the news now.
Is it?
But there you go. I mean, look, I had some of the best friends I've ever made in my life in Aontú, and like a part of me will forever be thankful for that, and will have a huge respect for, you know, some people even in the leadership of the party. And I do wish them all the best as well. I'm not going to be here and be sour. You know, I do think a lot of what the party was doing was a net force for good. But I do think that after leaving the party, you see a totally different side to some people. You know, so to be honest with you, the funniest thing that happened was the people who I really thought would reach out were the ones who didn't. And a lot of the people who I might have met once or twice over a Zoom meeting were the ones that actually did reach out. So there you go. I mean, there's a lot of good people in Aontú though, ultimately. And I do wish them all the best.
Good. Well, it's very magnanimous of you, you know. And I mean that half as a joke, but also quite seriously as well, because I think, again, speaking for myself, there was a lot of bitterness in me, not so much anymore, about the way I was treated by some in Fine Gael over the years. But it takes a lot to forgive, you know, and I suppose you can't ask for forgiveness without offering it as well, can you? You know, so
sure.
Don't let them keep you up at night or anything, you know, would be my advice. You get bags like these otherwise. So. But yeah, going back a little bit to the media coverage, I suppose. I mentioned that it was over the top. Mentioned a couple of the articles that I read and the tone of them and the way that they spoke about it. I suppose, like, even the contrast there between what you were saying, that when you were fired or whatever, big national news story, 30 plus articles or something like
30,
that.
Yeah.
But in the wake of it, there have been actually a slew of resignations, it sounds like, from Aontú. Important resignations that a party needs to function, or from positions that a party needs to function. And no sort of mention of that whatsoever. Is it not sexy enough? Like,
people like a bit of glitter with their stories nowadays, and I don't think the Aontú Ard Corla had much of that.
No.
But there you go. I suppose it just simply hasn't been publicised, really. People haven't really been talking about it. You know, and a lot of those resignations came from extremely close friends of mine that didn't want to stay in the party after what happened, you know. So there's a strong degree of loyalty there. I think a lot of people, and it might go back to, again, what you're seeing even with the Spoil the Vote campaign, which was that there was a very low... just among the Irish population at the moment, there's a very low trust and a very low, I suppose, how would you say, enthusiasm about electoral politics, about political parties. Political parties don't receive the same support that they used to. And so I feel like for a lot of people, even ones who happen to be in political parties, they aren't very enthusiastic about staying in them. They feel like it can be extremely difficult to have things change within parties, to watch that be implemented from the bottom up and to be truly grassroots. And people, I think, after seeing the likes of what Maria Steen and others did with the Spoil the Vote campaign, and Elaine Mullally, of course, I think people are very inspired by that and want to maybe try. And of course, it was so successful as well that people are now thinking of trying to get involved in politics in a different sense, not in the traditional sense of just joining a political party, because, I mean, at the end of the day, we have many political parties in this country, but very few at the same time. You have an infinite amount of flavours of left, and virtually nothing in the centre-right sphere of things. So I think a lot of people were inspired by the Spoil the Vote campaign, and a lot of people are very hopeful to see something come of that as well, you know.
Yeah, well, Stephen, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I can't help but think if this whole episode will do anything to Aontú's poll numbers, you know, because again, I'm thinking of media that I saw. I mentioned earlier on how, in my opinion, people feel the need to jump on these things in order to get head pats from people they never get head pats from. That was particularly the case with one article I read from a county or involving a county councillor of Aontú's, who really went hell for leather against you and said how thrilled and delighted he was to see that, you know, you'd been kicked out over all
Another
this.
individual who I thought would be reaching out, but there you go.
Really? Oh, but you don't know who I'm talking about, though, John.
Oh, I don't.
You know?
No,
exactly.
I don't, of course.
But we didn't rehearse this. But it does make me think, is another element of why they do this sort of stuff, in the hope that actually somehow their poll numbers, even if they expect them to fall, and I can't imagine anybody read that story and decided, well, I'm not voting for Aontú, and I can't imagine anybody read and decided they were. But as somebody in Aontú's HQ, wherever it is, hoping that, you know, they might budge from 3 to 3.1% or something in the next poll, or something along those lines, I just don't see it happening.
No, I don't see it happening, but I mean, look, if the assassination of my political career gave you 0.1% in the polls, I'm very glad I could have been of service, you know.
So invoice them.
Yes,
Invoice
exactly.
Because it does speak a little bit as well, I suppose, moving on to some of the broader problems that maybe the likes of Aontú experience. You mentioned how there in this country there's a swathe of left-wing parties that I personally think disagree on very, very little of substance. You know, they'll talk about, some of us are for lowering the property tax at,
who was
local
more
authority
woke
level.
this week, in other words.
Exactly, yeah. But I really regret to say that I include the likes of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil in that bracket. You know, when I see Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin, Labour, Social Democrats, with the possible exception of Sinn Féin, you know, I certainly can see the other four of them all becoming coalition at some stage if they need to, but that only happens if there's some sort of a challenge mounted from the right, which won't happen because, as you mentioned, at the moment, the centre-right space or the right space or whatever is so, I was going to say saturated, but that's the exact opposite of what I mean, unsaturated with something. It's deserted. Yeah. Excellent. Now, see, this is why we had you on. Deserted. You've got the likes of Aontú. Again, I think pretty arguably, I think they define themselves as centre-left at this stage. Some of us would say, well, in some issues maybe right-wing, but Independent Ireland being another one. These are parties that aren't at the moment presenting any serious prospect of challenging, you know, what's dominating the political sphere in this country.
Yeah.
And, you know, I suppose it makes me wonder, like, is there anything do you think there's anything that the likes of Aontú or Independent Ireland can do to start appealing to that spoil the vote constituency that we've seen now in the last month exists, you know? Of course, there is stuff they can do. Maybe the better question is there anything they will do? What do you think?
Well, in terms of what they could do for a start, I mean, like, listen to them. I mean, like, actually, seriously, listen to these people. I mean, it's no... Maria Steen's result in the Spoil the Vote campaign, what was it? It was somewhere near...
12.5%.
12.5%, yeah,
1 in 8,
exactly.
and that's of the... I think that's of the people who voted. 12.5%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, so in all seriousness, it could have been up as high as 20 nearly, with lots of factors including, of course, Jim Gavin and everything else. That's a serious size of the population. Like, listen to these people. They are sick of immigration. I mean, Aontú have not been willing to speak openly and honestly about the IPAS issue for a start. They haven't gone hard enough in immigration. A lot of people have said this. It was one of the issues I had with the party. Now, of course, I stayed despite that. I was not trying to coup the party, but I was for sure interested in bringing about new policy in terms of immigration into the party. So that's what I would say Aontú ought to do. I don't really see that happening, though, to be honest with you.
No. Well, it comes back a little bit to the an issue we kind of spoke about on a recent episode, where it comes to, like, you know, when something budges in England, things tend to budge in Ireland a little bit. And we've obviously seen in recent weeks, in the last week or two, I think it was, that they've hardened their immigration system a bit more. And by hardened, I mean, it's not even a real hardening as such. They're framing it as the Danish solution. The Danes would never have been typically described as vicious racists or anything like that, you know. but they do seem to have a bit of common sense and have their heads screwed on when it comes to this policy area. The British have been moving towards that. And sure as night follows day, you have then the Irish government coming along suddenly saying, oh, well, maybe not the worst thing in the world to pay attention to them. And all of a sudden anybody who, criticizes people who criticize immigration, well, they're dog whistling, says Simon Harris, So I wonder if Aontú is going to be further down this ridiculous meandering train and get to that bend eventually, follow the
I do wish them well. But I think a lot of the people who, let's say, would support a stronger, maybe more rigid immigration policy for Aontú to adopt, have left. I mean, over the past couple of years, even after this incident, a lot of us have left. Aontú have turned out a lot of their membership just in recent months and recent years as well. So I really don't see that happening, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And no matter how many protests there are, I suppose, to this effect, the message just won't get through. Which brings me, I suppose, to the next topic that I have on my mind, which is a story that I saw on the way up here earlier on, which is that, what's the guy's name? Detective Chief Superintendent Brian Woods, quote in the Irish Independent, saying that actually the so-called far right weren't the instigators or the organisers, let's say, of violence in the course of the City West protests recently, or even the Dublin riots 2 years ago, that there is an element of infiltration in these events by criminal elements who have an interest in this. But that what we were told at the time, which is that, there are far-right elements trying to stir up, violence and this, that, and the other. That actually, that's not correct, according to this pretty high-ranking member of a Garda Síochána.
Yeah.
You're not familiar with this one, no?
No, I haven't seen the story, actually.
Breaking news for John.
Breaking news for John is right, but that's incredible. I mean, that's a huge U-turn, obviously, from what the mainstream media would have been portraying all along.
Massively. And it makes, I think, maybe these protests, obviously the non-violent elements of them, but it makes these protests maybe a little bit more palatable to the political parties, who I think by and large came out criticizing, occasionally criticizing the violent element of it, but by and large just criticizing the entire concept. And maybe now that won't be so much the case,
Yeah, please God.
Aontú maybe with them. And then, of course, the other big news this week being, and I know this will be particularly pertinent to you as a community activist below in South Kildare, but the homelessness figures that emerged this week. Once again, we see record homeless figures announced. And of course, every month now at this stage, that's the headline, record homeless figures, record homeless figures.
It goes up by what it seems like it's going up by 1,000 a year, which is just ridiculous.
It's incredible. 16,800, I think, were announced this week, including 5,300 children. And these are the last figures that'll be released before Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go down before Christmas.
No, and you're actually just reminding me now. This time last year, I was on Upfront with Katie Hannon, her show on RTE. And I remember specifically citing 15,000. So to say what now, 16,000?
16,800. 17,000.
So 17,000, of course. I'm sure there's 200 and
absolutely,
exactly, yeah. So it's just, it's shocking, like, it's spiraling upwards.
But none of there's no, and in fairness, we've been quite critical of the likes of Aontú, who are in fairness an opposition party up to this point in the podcast, but there isn't maybe very much that they can do as such about it, but I don't see much in the way of plans coming from any party, whether they're in government or in opposition, to address this and try and put a lid on it.
It's like the riddle no one can quite solve,
Exactly, yeah. Well, I think people can solve it.
They can for sure. I don't think the will is there, though.
That's exactly it. It's the will to solve it isn't there.
And one of the issues as well is you have opposition parties that aren't putting serious solutions forward. They're more so putting advertisement style solutions. So, well, we're going to do this. We're going to build this many houses. The actual solution, breaking it down, mightn't be as glamorous, but for them, it's what you call auctioneer politics. For a party like Aontú or the Social Democrats or anyone, it's kind of like, what did Sinn Féin say they were going to build this week? 300 houses? Well, we'll build 400. And it's like, it's just a game like that.
Nobody's going to build shit. That's the problem.
Exactly, yeah.
None of them demonstrate.
And even if they do, there's too many people coming into the country to equate that. It's an impossible challenge.
Well, I don't know. It's something that we've spoken a fair bit on the podcast about. I think it's something that we're going to speak a fair bit about again in future,
sure.
unfortunately. But all I suppose we can do is count on good people like yourself to throw their hats in the ring and try and make a change at a political level as best you can, you know. We're all hoping, you know.
No pressure.
No pressure, no. Right, well, look, on that note, I think, John, sad as it is, I think we might bring this episode to a close. I'd like to thank everybody at home, as usual, for watching. One thing I'm very bad for saying is that you should make a sacrifice to the algorithm by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing, whatever you have to do to basically just register the fact that you're actually enjoying this as much as we are.